very much for joining us today. Upstairs. We want to acknowledge that we have quite a few attendees that are with us via Zoom. So when we're having this discussion, please be aware that your voice will need to project so that gets caught and that they can hear you. That's one of their biggest challenges in Zoom. They feel like they can't hear what's going on and they want to know what folks are saying. I also wanted to let you know that we're recording this session because there were a number of faculty that really wanted to be here, but for certain reasons couldn't make it. So we're recording the session that they'll be able to follow later. I want to say a big thank you to Chris Hackala, who has supported and sponsored this session and provided pizza for us. Thank you in the room. Yay. Thank you, Chris. And it's a great opportunity to demonstrate the collaboration that takes place between these departments, and we're working together in a complementary fashion. So we're happy to be here with them. I'll just take a quick minute for those of you that don't know me. I'm Kim Colangelo. I'm Associate Director at ROSI, the Regional Office of Regional Online and Continuing Education. And we're here with our Associate VP of ROSI, John Eisler. And the team, the Instructional Design Team, which consists of Ann Dumont, Anna Loftus, and Bree Perkins, our instructional designers. And then we're going to have a panel discussion, as you know, that will include Ariel Rodriguez, and here I go, I want to make sure I get the titles right, Associate Professor and Program Director of Recreation Management, and Paul Tifo, Associate Professor of English, the Department Chair of Literature, Writing, and Journalism. And on Zoom, we have Lori Rodriguez. Wave, Lori, so everybody knows which one you are. There you go.
I'm the only one.
An assistant professor for the Criminal Justice Program. So let's see. We want to give you just a brief outline that this really is a discussion. We want you to hang in. We want to be sure to contribute and hear what you have to say, and take your thoughts into consideration as our institution moves in this new direction. And we want to be sure that we're supporting the faculty appropriately. So we want to also share that this session will discuss course design, yours and ours, instructional design and how that works. And then we're going to have the panel discussion where we can talk to faculty that have used instructional design and get their thoughts on, did it work, did it not work, how they feel about the whole process. So the other thing I want to mention is in front of you on the table, and for those of you on Zoom, we will be sending this out to you electronically. It's an evaluation form. So here is the form that's in front of you, and if you don't have one, if you're sitting in these chairs, there's some extra right by Chris, along with the sign-in sheet. So please be sure to sign in if you haven't already. And then complete that evaluation before you leave, and just leave it with us, and we'll go ahead and compile all the results. So I think I have captured all of my housekeeping comments. So now I would like to turn it over to Bree and Anna, who are going to start the discussion on course design.
All right, guys. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Brian.
Lunchtime, right? Just by show of hands, who here has ever designed an online or blended course? Ooh, a lot of hands. Great. All right. Another question. Who here has designed a course? All right. Everybody's hand should pretty much be up for the most part, right? I want to talk about what does your process look like for this. So, like, if we're dissecting this, where do you start? What does it look like when you're assigned a course and you have to design it? Where do we go from here? You all raised your hands, so I know you've done it.
So I usually try to think of why we're offering the course, meaning the purpose of the course. And as I'm remembering it, I usually do almost like a course description first, and then go that sort of a deductive from the course description. Then I go and say, okay, well, this is what the objectives would have to be, or this is what, and then some of the content to support the objectives.
So you're pulling apart that from those course objectives and the course description.
Right.
Gotcha. Anybody else? It doesn't have to be an online or blended course, even your in-person courses. Where do you start? Go ahead.
First part would actually be, what's the purpose of the course?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And much of that has to do with obviously we put titles in courses and we put descriptions in there, but more importantly, where does it fit within your curriculum as a whole? This is a very, very big part of now what we're trying to accomplish. And then I actually think with the end in mind and try to break down what is it that I want students to be able to have once I have that, and then work backwards, because then you can break it into different modules. You can think about foundational material versus, how they get to where they're going to be. And I'd have to say, early on in my career, I didn't do that part as well as I feel like I do that better now.
I love that you took that macro level approach. I think that's something that we miss a lot. We get kind of the narrow vision of thinking it's just this course, but it really is, how does it fit into the bigger puzzle and the bigger picture of that? How do we connect it to our colleagues and our peers and our programs? And so I think that's something that's really important. Anybody else?
I see some notes in the chat, perhaps.
Those are just folks letting me know that they didn't. But if you guys on Zoom do have questions, feel free to jump in. You guys can come through the loudspeaker if you unmute yourself, or you can feel free to use our chat as well. Anybody else? All right.
I would say the learning outcome. What am I looking to get from, for the students to get from the course?
Absolutely. Kind of getting that why, that meat of your course, making sure it's always rooted in that. Okay. Anna?
Sure. So kind of based off the questions that we were asking, as we know, we use Brightspace now as our learning management system. So we were kind of wondering if anyone is using Brightspace and what types of tools are helping you in your course design process. I know that there's some tools that people have been implementing more and using more, and just kind of seeing how that has either helped or made it difficult in your course design. If anyone is utilizing Brightspace in those terms. So one of the things that, as instructional designers, let's just say a tool is video notes. So it's just like a more interactive way to get people involved for blended online courses. So for example, instead of writing like I know Bree's teaching a course this semester, and her introduction notes or her introduction announcements every week, she puts a video note up, and she's really gotten some good feedback about just how that has really made you feel more instructive presence within the Brightspace course. So
yeah, my students hate it. They feel like I'm stalking them every week. It's excellent. Like you never get to leave us, even if you're online. You get to see it every week.
But it really does develop a sense of community in the online environment, and that's one of the hardest things that online students face. So by utilizing a tool like that, you're building community.
Is that the same as the announcements?
So
So
no video
Post it
note.
on the announcement section.
Okay.
In Brightspace.
Because I give them an announcement every week,
Which is great.
so-
Yeah, that's that, and most folks do that, and that's awesome to be able to do, because you want to stay connected to
Right.
your students. This just adds the face. It adds the visual piece to it, and sometimes even seeing the voice inflection or the body language, sometimes that makes people feel a little bit more safe.
Yeah,
You know,
they've said that to me.
yeah, it's your face, really,
Oh.
that's what they want to see.
They feel like they get to know you. So
Yeah, no, they-
presence in that course. And kind of build off that. I know a lot of you raised your hand. You said that you have designed or constructed an online or blended course. How many of you would be interested in ever teaching an online or blended course here?
So some of us do, yeah.
All right. Why or why not? Anybody want? Oh, I put you on the spot now. You didn't think you don't have to answer that, right? Why or why not?
Panelists, you can share your thoughts.
We
Okay.
have different questions for you guys.
Okay, I wasn't sure. All right.
Go ahead.
I think what's great about conceptualizing an online course is it forces you to re-envision to reimagine, re-envision, reassess what your curricular goals are and how the format of instruction connects to those curricular goals. So you have to think intentionally about the way you're designing instructional materials to support the learning outcomes. And I think that is a fabulous creative project. And I think you can sort of map then the learning outcomes based on those projects as well. So I think it's a great exercise.
Now, do you do that at the beginning of your course? Do you do that throughout the course? Like, what does your process look like for that?
So I think it has to happen at the beginning. It starts at the beginning. But then it's probably part of that longer term trial and error, right? So you've got to
There's
do
adjustments.
Yeah, you have to be prepared for making minor adjustments in terms of delivery of service and design and project conceptualization as the course evolves and progresses. And then you've got to reanalyze at the end of the semester also.
Well, plus your students change. I know that was something I learned from teaching online. I was like ready, I'm like, I got this course, I'm ready to go. Everything's laid out, I've got this. My students are completely different than I anticipated them being. So there's a lot of learning from that and adjusting as I went. Anybody else, why would you not teach online? Go ahead.
Well, I think we have to consider also that the students are changing themselves. And I think by using a different manner of teaching, whether it be online, we can reach out to so many more students than we have in the past. Also, I think it allows for flexibility even within curriculums. You can have in-person classes, but there are some students that do need additional time because they have to work in order to go to school. So they're making those type of decisions. So this gives more flexibility to curriculums. It allows students to really to manage their own education a little bit more. So I think it gives a lot more flexibility. And again, just the reach that it can have is limitless, essentially.
Absolutely.
So kind of go off that question, obviously people have some troubles or some pain points when we're talking about course design. So one of the things we try to help with in course design, instructional design, is kind of working with faculty through those challenges or pain points involved in course design. So is there anything specific, if you would feel comfortable sharing, that you've kind of had trouble with your course design that you think would maybe be helpful to get some assistance on? Not so much like the content, because obviously you are the subject matter experts, but more of just the course design process, what might be easier for you if you had someone else to help you with, if there's anything that you can think of.
We seem to be talking about.
Bree, one of the problems that you and I have come across
Go ahead, Cheryl, you're good.
in my biology class is that can you hear me?
Yeah.
All good.
Okay. The way the discussion posts are listed in the glossary, the different activities are listed in the course don't necessarily correspond to the way they're listed in the grade book. So sometimes I'm searching for things in my grade book to put a grade in, and it's, I don't know, they don't seem to correspond. For the most part, they do, but they don't always correspond one-to-one. That was something I was going to work on over the semester break with you, but I'll bring it up now.
Yeah, definitely. So making sure all these pieces within the course are aligned, so that way when you're facilitating a course, it shows up in the grade book, it shows up in your course almost in the same way. So that's definitely something we can fix and work on. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I find that a lot of the faculty that I've been working with, the grade book is an issue because you are creating items in your content, then you have to create a grade item to make sure it shows up. So that's quite an issue. I think there's also the thought between developing your course through the content or just going to your assignments tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it depends on how you've been trained as a teacher also. And I know when I work with faculty for the one-on-one classroom, I'd like them to think about the content, week to week, how are you organizing? But I know I've worked with that, they're doing it by topics. And I also know in the online courses, it's set up by dates a lot of times too. And I think it is a different approach to how you're adding information into it. So I think that's something that we need to think about, is going strictly which tool or going through content, making sure we have everything in there.
That's a really good point, because D2L lends itself, and not just Brightspace, but courses in general, lend itself to different modes of delivery and different forms of delivery. We see this all the time as designers. I know Effie, you're in the room. I work with Effie, not to put you on the spot, but like one of the things that Effie and I work on is something that's a little bit different of a design than you would see in a typical course. We structure it with chunks of content that we can flow through kind of in a more natural pace. And we can open this up to a myriad of different designs and different types. So it's not really just this cookie cutter, like you have to have it week by week. You can do it from assignments if you decide to do it and focus on those puzzle pieces instead of the whole puzzle. It's a different design approach. Speaking of design.
Well, before we go to that, I think it's important that folks realize that your process, how you conceptualize your course is your journey. We're on the journey with you, so that it's really important that you understand that we don't come in with, you have to do it a certain way. And for example, Anne, she went in and she actually built the entire course in Brightspace. So now we're kind of doing it, you know, now I've got to put a syllabus together, but the point is that's what made sense to her. That's how she wanted it. That was her vision, what she wanted it to do. Is that okay? I said
Absolutely.
that? Okay. But that may not have been my process, but that doesn't mean that it's not okay to do that. So I think one of the things that we really want to encourage is that your process, we're here to go with you on that. So how can we assist you where you want it to go, so that it's not just about it has to be this way or it has to be that way. I just want to put a plug in for that, because it's always different. Each one comes at it because you know your content.
And every instructor may have a different starting point. So you may be handed a syllabus from 3 years ago that needs updates that was done someone other than by you.
Yeah.
So like we can work with you with that, or you may have to be handed a description and course objective and say, here you go. Get everything ready. So we can work with you at any starting point that you're at. We're really flexible, and we just want to be there to collaborate and help you through the process of making the course what you would hope it would be.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that there are master courses that ROSI uses, but other faculty don't use master courses, and we respect that process too. And so the idea is, again, not only to meet you where you are, but to specifically help you with your pain point, with the challenge that you face, and or that you've already faced and don't quite know how to overcome that. And it might be just an activity. It might just be the way that we're going to talk about how you're going to get to the same point, but not in the same way. You realize the old way isn't quite working, or you're ready for an update. So we're going to talk about that in design.
Hello, Bree.
Hi.
This is Marilyn Morton.
Hi, Marilyn. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, just great. And I thank you for hosting this session, because one thing I have learned is to rely heavily on the instructional designers to give me a different perspective. But the thing I want to point out is that teaching online means that you have to really revamp your way of communicating.
Absolutely.
Your communication skills are not the same, because you cannot look at somebody and say, well, I can see in their eyes that they don't understand. And, you know, early on, I learned that I would set it up so that the students had to respond before they could see to me, or to do the original posting before they could see their colleagues' postings, because that way I could always tell whether they understand or not. But I think that teaching online means that you have to really think through how somebody interprets what it is that you're trying to convey. And that may be totally different than the way you would teach in a classroom.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point, because it really, and it's not just with facilitation, of course, too. It's also from the design perspective. We take it all the way back to step one, and not just with design, but any mode of delivery that's different. How do we really get there and get to where the students are at, what they need, and communicate that?
Well, that's why, to me, it's important for the instructional designers to give me their perspective, so that you have somebody that you as an instructor can brainstorm with in terms of teaching what you consider yourself to be an expert in. And but being an expert in that subject matter does not mean that you communicate it well online.
Absolutely. Thank you. I want to turn it over to Anna and Ann, our two of our other instructional designers, to talk a little bit more about instructional design. So that was actually a wonderful segue, Marilyn. Thank you.
Here we go. We wanted to talk a little bit about what is our approach, what are we doing? And when we talk about the instructional design process, it's really starting with that pedagogy and pedagogy. We really look and we rely on a lot of the learning theories that we have been kind of taught throughout the years, you know, so that we're not just coming in and saying, well, you know, it's just Ann Dumont's perspective. we really try to rely on what is going to be the best approach, and we rely on these learning theorists as being part of that. So that's the first piece.
Yeah, and also Quality Matters as well. We're all certified in Quality Matters, which provides some best practices for online and blended learning and such. But like Anne said, basically what we're founded on, she had talked about pedagogy and andragogy, but this kind of house here just shows some different pillars that are included in our instructional design process. So I know we talked about who's taught online and blended, but who's worked with an instructional designer before? Here or anywhere? Okay. So about half of you. Okay. So up here you'll see, based on just some things that we, sorry.
No, it's not you, it's, I'm thinking about it, but we're probably blocking the view.
Okay, so the first pillar here, one of the things that we focus on is flow. So this is sometimes something that may get overlooked because you're really passionate about the content, so which is great because you're the expert in that content and you know how it applies to your field. But we're there to make sure that the flow of your course, that it makes sense. Is it consistent? Do students know where to go every week when they're trying to find their activities, when they're trying to find their reading? Because online learning can be difficult for some people, blended as well. And so we want to make sure that the flow of their course is not a barrier. We want to make sure students know where to find things in Brightspace. Also, is it easy to follow in terms of like the topics, the objectives, the alignments? Does the course does it make sense to the learner? We want to make sure there's a flow, and we're all here to help you with that. So, if you come up with a great topic and a great week, if we see that there might be some issues with a student being able to answer the discussion based on the resources that you provided, we might say, hey, this is a really good discussion, but in terms of flow, can you maybe find another resource that would help supplement that? So in terms of the flow, that's kind of what that pillar means. And then for the function, just like, does everything work together? So do the activities, do the readings, does everything align? As instructional designers, we focus a lot on course objectives, which I know course outcomes, which a few people mentioned before. So we want to make sure that everything that the learners are being asked to do relates back to those course outcomes, which then ties back into the topic. So we want to make sure that students are not just answering a question to answer a question, but it goes to the objectives, it goes to the course description, and then overall how it fits into your curricular goals in general.
Which is what you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I have a question as this applies to your foundational concepts there, pedagogy and andragogy. How do you define it, each of those terms? And probably more appropriately, how do you apply those different terms to flow, function, and continuous improvement? I guess I think I need a little bit more on that part. As I think about this, because having experienced one online class, I took it this summer just to see what this would be about. I'm not really comfortable with how they did it. And I have a feeling it was more of a pedagogy rather, well, no, I think they were trying to get andragogy out of it, but I need to hear from you as to how you approach that perspective.
So you want to define it first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of overlap between the two. And this is something that I know Chris and I talked about in center a while back as well, is that the functions of learning are the same for the most part. The human brain learns in the same way. However, the context is different. So teaching an 18-year-old or 16-year-old or 17-year-old or 10-year-old even is going to be different than teaching somebody who is 57. The course I'm teaching right now, I'm the youngest person in my course. And that's not a bad thing. It was a very eye-opening experience because these are people with different needs, different demands, different life experiences. And so for you to connect those points in there requires a little bit more intentionality towards the andragogical side. So it's not so much I'm creating a different learning, I'm creating a different experience. And that's where they really see the two divide. Did I get that?
And the thing that I love about this conversation is what you just shared is the mother load. You took a course.
Yeah.
And when a faculty member who has not had that experience ventures through it, you see things so differently because you realize this faculty didn't give me, what are they asking me to do? I don't understand, but it causes questions because now you're not the faculty, you're the learner. And so that's the biggest, I would say, challenge that I see for faculty, that they literally have to reverse the way they process, the way they think students learn. And so the fact that you did that is extremely valuable. So when we're looking at flow, function, and improvement, continuous improvement, when you do that from the student perspective, how is the student going to find those pieces? I know how I would find them, but wait a minute, it's not me, it's them. How can I help them find exactly what they're looking for, but I want them to get the content I want them to get. So that's, again, another opportunity to work with an ID that could help make sure that the course is genuinely student-focused, student-centered, and that the information you're trying to convey actually is understood by the student. And that experience feeds in to your continuous improvement. Because everything you learn, every time you teach an online or blended course, now when you look at that course, you're like, I took notes last semester and I realized this worked, I gotta tweak this one. This has to change, this has to change. And now you work with a designer to iron out the wrinkles, smooth it out, and it is just a constant process of making sure that the course becomes even more student-centered than maybe where you started. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And actually, Susan had a good comment that she put in chat here about this, is that, you know, one of the things we look with at IDs is making sure that we're communicating in a way that really maps to our students. So again, that flow function. She said, what I learned about online teaching is first how to work with the instructional design team to provide feedback on what I may not notice. Also love working online, scaffolding the curriculum with the team. I've worked on 2 master courses and a teach out. I think it's important that we remember to provide opportunities for students to communicate by Skype and other platforms. I'm an employer liaison in my full-time job, and employers frequently comment on the business need for business skills and soft skills. Additionally, many employers use Skype and interview queue. This appears to correlate with increase in online learning. So what she's really saying is that we're working to create these skills, not just from, you know, the 18, 17-year-old, but also that map out to the online learner as well, or to the adult learner as well.
And these tools, they are carrying with them. As we're hearing back from students that are moving on, and, oh, I still use, I've had students say, I'm still using WebEx, or we're working with Zoom now, we're working with this now, and we work with a company out in California, and we're located in Boston, and so the reach is extensive, and the tools that they're using in your online and blended courses are valuable. Sir?
Sir. I think that Kevin brings up a really interesting point about some of that tension that we sometimes feel about pedagogy versus andragogy. And I mean, andragogy, I mean, adult learning theory has its share of critics these days. And I think we're seeing sort of that blending of the universality of learning, as Bree mentioned early on. I think a lot of the principles of andragogy, meaning adults learn differently, and therefore something like memorization, regurgitation, objective testing isn't really the best learning environment for a lot of adults. So the learning tends to be more social, more generative, more of an emphasis on critical thinking and less on memorization, things like that. But there's a lot of aspects of andragogy that are just so conducive to the online environment that even a traditional age learner benefits from the application of a lot of those andragogical principles. So where online pedagogy and andragogy, they sort of blend together. And I think a big emphasis for this team has been universal design. How do we design, how do we make it student-centered, and how do we make it the environment conducive to maximizing the learning of all learners, bridging all the way to Erin's field, where when you try to make accommodations for people, it actually helps all learners in many ways. So I think the distinctions have largely broken down, but I think these folks have been influenced by andragogy, even if they're not in adult learning theory, in adult learning, working in the online environment, because, for example, asking people just to read something and then take a test isn't going to work. I mean, first of all, there's no lecture, there's no explanation necessarily, but also that's not necessarily how you're going to generate evidence of learning so much in an online environment.
And we've seen that in the online courses that don't work, as you're saying, Kevin, like if you've taken an online course that just wasn't good, like it's clear as day what isn't working there. A lot of it is memorize, regurgitate, write this discussion post, write this paper over and over and over, and there's not a really rich learning experience in that kind of design. So if you can branch out and find more engaging activities or application or ways that they can connect that, especially from an andragogical model, how can we connect it to their life? That's important. I see hand up back there.
Well, I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about, I understand that this is a way to do it, but the reality is that we have faculty who are trying to start teaching these courses that have not done any of this work before. And really for them, creating a discussion, putting their PowerPoints up there, it takes a lot of work and following all these comments. So I'm seeing like so many people struggling with different pieces, and then this gets down to students, and they are also in social work. We have students who came back to school after 25 years. They have no idea. I had one student took my online course, and she didn't know that she had an email. Yeah. So many, there's a variety of issues there that it's so difficult. It takes so much time to address, and the quality can get compromised so easily.
That issue of student preparedness,
And
that is huge.
faculty.
Yes,
It goes both ways.
These students
Yeah,
too. I mean,
I like the online, and I'm
Consider
still
prepared for
struggling to keep them engaged and to have all these things that you've taught me, and
And it's a continuous improvement process.
It's a process.
And that's why I really like the blended course, because to your point with the online, those weeks that we have online is horrible to get the engagement. Like you say, it has to be, the original post has to be done by Thursday. They literally wait till Thursday to post the original post. So you,
11:58.
so you are literally like, hello, trying to do video notes, trying to do things to get them engaged, and it's not until Thursday. And then it really doesn't give you the opportunity to go over content. But when you have the blended course, you're then able to have an in-class session, go through a presentation, have them set up in groups and do all these activities to make sure they're really getting it, and not just reposted something that they saw written somewhere. And it also puts I guess I would say, will put the responsibility on us as instructors to say, okay, well, I understand what it's like being in this particular environment, and in having done that, I know this is something that's missing here that I need to add. And so how do I add some articles or add some experiences or add some pieces so that as they are sitting in their groups, they're able to get something more out of it, right? And so the onus is on us to do that, but I think to your point, and when it's strictly online, it is very difficult to do that when they are literally putting us on a time clock to say, this is only the amount of time I'm giving you, and this is the only amount of time that I'm going to spend, and not really trying to divulge any more time than that, and we want to be able to give them a fulfilling opportunity and experience, but if they're not willing to accept that responsibility, it does make it very difficult.
And there's a difference in the learner too, when you're talking an online environment versus a blended environment, even versus an in-person environment. There's a different motivation because it feels like there's a lot more on the weight of the shoulders, or on the shoulders of the student. I can speak, I promise. That makes it to where they have to take that initiative to really engage and be a motivated learner. So it creates kind of this struggle. I do want you to keep in mind too, when you're talking about designing a course, and Effie made a really good point, there's a lot. There's a lot to be done with that. And so keep in mind, Rome wasn't built in a day, neither is your course. So baby steps. If you can change one activity today in your course, you can change one piece in your course, a delivery model, one thing that you would do, start there. Don't feel like you have to completely throw the course you've been teaching for 30 years into the waste bin and go, okay, this is done. I have to redesign it because my instructional design team said I'm horrible. No, we don't ever say that, by the way, because that's mean, and we're not mean people.
And it's not true.
No, it's not true.
Let's go back to truth.
But it's something that, build it small. Start with a piece and then change that, and we'll build from that. We'll go from there. And so just take one step.
Well, it really comes down to this. This is a collaborative process. It's a collaborative relationship. Yeah. It's the faculty brings the contents. The instructional design team, all of us, I think one have an MED. We've all been trained and hold degrees in education, so we know how to educate. So we can take the process of the design tool, and with your content and your experience and what you've done in the classroom.
And your passion.
Yes, we
That's
can,
what we really
we can
want to
help
see.
to build that or make that something that maybe is easier for that student to understand or get the result that you're looking for. How do I get my students to be better at time management?
Yes.
I said Thursday is the date. Why are they not making the deadline? Am I communicating something that makes them think that this is optional? Is it possible that they're thinking that it doesn't matter? So it's that kind of critical thinking of the process and the repeated situations you see rise to the surface that make you say, hey, and that's what I think is so powerful about this. You know, what worked for you might not work for you, but what worked for you may work for her. You know, and vice versa. We may all be able to find those pieces that work, and then we can identify some of our own best practices, and we can apply those in course design and instructional design.
It's a two-way street. We learn from you guys just as much. I mean, it's one of those things where every time I work with a new faculty member, I learn something from you guys. Because there's just something new you're bringing to the table, which is incredible.
Did you have anything else in instruction? Well, this brings us then.
Well, it was just a continuous improvement. I was just curious how folks, how do you approach when you have the course that you're teaching over the years? How do you keep it fresh? What do you do? What's the approach you take? What's your process?
I provide new information or ask questions from my students for what they would like to see or what they would like to know about. And as far as keeping them engaged and meeting deadlines, and every announcement that I make, I just reiterate that even though deadline it says due by Sunday 11:59, does not mean that you have to wait until Sunday 11:59 to post it. And the way I reinforce that is when every time my student makes a assignment post, I respond individually to that student. You know, if they responded on Thursday, then I respond right back to them on Thursday.
That's huge. That's huge.
Not everyone can do that.
In discussions, I go in the back window and let them know, I love what you said. I'd like to really have a further discussion on that. And we go back and forth and back and forth. And that really lets the students know that you really care about what they're writing about. That also helps you know that they're reading the information and they're retaining it. And it helps them with their time management skills.
Presence in the classroom. Sure. Presence. Anyone else?
Just to throw one thing we've learned clearly that's beneficial is even if you don't have time to address the questions, even if you don't have time to really get into it with the student, that little piece that says, so sorry, tied up right now, we'll be back in touch with you tomorrow evening, by tomorrow evening. Just that little sentence allows the student to recognize that you're monitoring, you're there, and you're going to be in touch with them. And so that little sentence is hugely valuable to them and amazingly devastating when you don't get it. That's a key to online. So that is a super important thing to think about because we see that all the time.
One other thing I wanted to add for continuous improvement as well, I was working with a faculty who was designing a human sexuality course, and she had put an optional discussion in the last week called missed topics, things that students thought were really prevalent in today's world that she thought that other people would want to learn more about. And when we went to go refresh the course the next semester, she said, these are some topics I got that I really think I should incorporate into there. So it's like you said, adding new information. We do, current events courses, education courses, stuff on policy, stuff that's always changing. So I think it's important to always kind of be looking out to see what's being updated so that your students are not getting, outdated information. So.
Anybody have anything else they want to say on that? We are right on time. I'm just so impressed. I can't get out of the door. It's morning in the morning. So we want to shift to our panel discussion now. And to remind you, we have Paul Tifo, we have Ariel Rodriguez, and Lori Rodriguez online via Zoom. And first, we would like to open the floor to you. Do you have questions you'd like to ask this panel who have had experience in traditional courses, online courses, blended courses, and course design and development as master course content experts? But maybe you have some questions you'd like to ask them first.
I have a question.
Go, Marilyn.
Yes. I had just typed in a comment here that we have a whole new group of students, WISE students online now from all over the United States, and they are managers, supervisors, directors, and what I have found is resistance sometimes because they don't always want to listen, quote unquote, and sometimes they resent being instructed. And I frequently have to convey to them that I am working with them in an academic environment to help them meet their goals, and that it is not, you know, it's not the same. So I'm wondering if the panel has some suggestions on, you know, handling these kinds of situations. I've not had, the only problem I had was one, I corrected a paper significantly, and the student wanted to know if my corrections were a joke.
That sounds like.
And that's the only time I had a problem. So I arranged so that the student and I talked, you know, by phone, so that we could really discuss what this was all about, and we worked it through and everything. But they're used to directing people in, you know, and like I said, in managing, and sometimes they don't want to listen to what, you know, our instructions in the situation. So I wonder if you have any feedback, advice.
Marilyn, can I jump in?
Absolutely.
I absolutely understand what you're talking about, because I go through the same thing with my students often. And I think your solution in terms of talking to them on the phone is probably the best thing to do. I had a student who simply did not follow instructions, rather wrote papers based on his experience, rather than on what I wanted them to read, the new knowledge, their opinions of what they thought rather than facts.
Right.
And we did talk on the phone extensively, and he understood where I was coming from in that regard. But the problem was, he says, well, I took a class last term where I was supposed to only give my opinion, and now you're telling me I have to rely on the readings. So why is one class one way and another class another way? And perhaps that could be clearer somehow on Brightspace page. They I think, need that very clearly spelled out. So I don't have a solution for you other than really talk one-on-one with the students.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we have the same problem in the classroom, period. Oh, seriously.
Well, you know, you make a vital point. It really doesn't matter. The student's the student, and
The students are going to give their opinion whether they've read the material or not. And I don't know a single faculty in the traditional classroom that really wants an opinion other than potentially psychology, because there's some elements to reflection and so forth. But I've almost given up on reflection because I don't want to read the crap. Sorry, I'm a little blunt, but I mean, the issue is a legitimate issue.
I think
right now
that
don't understand learning.
I think that the older the students are, the more they feel that they want to tell you what the subject matter is.
What I say to the students frequently is that I respect your opinion, but how have you supported that opinion? What facts have you given to support your opinion? And then that's how I explain that 50% grade I gave them.
Diana Barnett has a really good point here as well. She's talking about sometimes that might be messed in the fact that they have these real world experiences that they feel are fact because they've lived them, and so they feel like this is my truth. So I'm going to give this to the paper here. A lot of their older students who have lived in managerial roles and job roles and stuff, and so they come in thinking that they do know better.
And there's we talk about a lot of controversial we talk about a lot of controversial subjects in my class, and so I always sort of like keep the discussion posted more of opinion. But with Marilyn, as long as you back it up by fact, I'm not here to change your opinion. I don't care what your opinion is. I just want you to have an opinion based on the research. But when you write me a research paper, I make it very clear that the word I, you, we. If you're not the researcher, I don't want to see those words in my papers, because that's not a research paper. Then once again, that's your opinion. I don't really care what your opinion is. Sometimes I want a research paper, you know, and it's been very difficult sometimes trying to get them to do that. You know, I had one student a couple semesters ago who his APA in grammar was not that great. And I don't take a lot of points off for it, but I'm a sort of a grammar Nazi, and I corrected a lot in red. And I said, "You're going to grad school next semester, right?" He's like, "Yes." I said, "You better learn how to do this now, or they're going to tear you to shreds."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, okay." So he backed right off, but it was one way, I guess it worked.
Yeah.
I think, first off, I got to say, Kevin's completely wrong. Psychology is completely based in fact. I don't know who he thinks he is. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I just had to straighten that out. But seriously, one of the things that I think, and I don't know the faculty member's name, but the use of the term corrections now, in particular with older students, feels a little bit punitive. And I know it sounds silly, but language matters a lot. And so I've recouched almost everything, which looks like corrections and feedback. And I tell students you're getting feedback, and feedback is oftentimes feedback they may not want to hear, but it's feedback to make their work continuously better. And by couching it that way, it actually helps students. They don't push back quite as much on that. And I mean, I can, if anybody's interested, there's some interesting psychology studies that show this evidence. But I think that really helps. The other piece is, and this is going back to John, I've been quiet for a while, I apologize. And everyone knows me knows I can't believe I've been quiet this long. What John said about andragogy and pedagogy, those lines have really, really blurred in the last 3 to 5 years in the literature. And Bree pointed out at the beginning about how students all humans learn the same way, but it's the context in which you give the feedback and the structure of the feedback that really is the most important piece. And so when you're giving feedback to adults who have experience, the feedback can be given with a little bit more expectation that they can contextualize it. And with 18 to 22-year-olds, they don't have always the context. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something we really need to think about as we're working in these environments is how can I couch the feedback I give the students in a way that's going to lead them to get to where I want them to be. That takes experience and practice in the online environment. I think we are at some level at an advantage because you can write and then erase and write again as you think through things. I mean, Kevin, you pointed out how a lot of stuff happens in the class. I mean, Kevin's right. We get pushback in the class all the time, and there you have to kind of do it on the feet. But it's the nuanced thing, but it's all working towards the same goal. It's just using slightly different contextualization.
And if you leave comments in bright space, it's actually called feedback. So it aligns.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct. It does say feedback. So it aligns with what you said.
Yeah.
So,
this is Daryl, and I just want to piggyback on that point around framing corrections. I know that what I try to use is language like, this is your argument as I understand it, and it will be strengthened if you were to do these particular things. So I'm really trying to provide correction, but also try to help them to see how to strengthen their case from an academic perspective. Right. And that seems to be pretty well received by the students because they feel like their ideas are taken seriously. And it also provides me with an opportunity to say, yeah, I mean, maybe in one setting that would work. In this particular setting, you have to kind of lay your case out in a slightly different way.
That really kind of lends nicely as a segue into a question I would hope we could ask the panel, and that is, how has your course design process improved the student learning experience?
First.
I'm Paul, everybody, and I think I'm here by virtue of my inexpertise. I'm a new, as I don't teach online, but I spent the summer designing or redesigning online courses for other people to teach. So just as one thing I want to throw in there, we talked about the learner. We also have to think about, I think a lot of us we'll be building master courses for faculty we haven't met yet, who might be very different from one another. So that's kind of where my headspace has been, thinking about both of those communities. That was my little intro. What was the actual question, Kim?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was asking how the course design process, and reflecting on what you went through in the
Yeah.
course ideal, how that has improved the student learning experience.
So since I teach in the traditional classroom, just that trial by fire with Anne and Bree over the summer, not that they were fiery, they were great. Really, Brightspace now has a much bigger presence in my traditional classroom. It was usually helpful during the snow days this week. I think it's a great way. Kevin took a class, but even designing one can, even if you only teach in the traditional classroom, can really show you what you can do with Brightspace here on campus.
Yeah, I think also to piggyback on that, just allowing me to be more creative and having more connectivity with my content. So I think that's been extremely valuable. And I know when I sat down with Anne and we talked a lot about one of my online classes, she really challenged me to think more critically as to how I connected these modules that it made sense in my mind and their connectivity with the assignments. And sometimes I was viewing assignments not connected with multiple modules, for example. And so going back to, I think, Anna, you were talking about the flow. So it was funny hearing you talk about these because I saw it in real life. I just didn't have the same words that you used. So it was nice to go through that process. And and also about being creative and allowing me it's, having quizzes is good, but having discussions and quizzes, I think, gives more variety. And then you add other things as well. Then it just adds more variety to the learning experience, and it doesn't become as laborsome as sometimes the experience can be. So I think that was really important. But also the actual experience within Brightspace was something that also got improved. And because of this process, one of the things I've personally taken out of it is because I've learned so much about it. Now it's great to be a resource. Two things. I love being a resource to other faculty members in my department. I think that's wonderful. But also, anytime a student has any issues, regardless of what it is, I can answer it. Like on Brightspace, I can answer it. This doesn't function, or this, I can answer it now. I can deal with it, manage it. Having that confidence. It doesn't matter what happens. Oh, the quiz it doesn't matter. I can fix it. So anything that happens, I can fix. And so it's nice to have that comfort level. So my students generally don't have any issues. So.
I would like to, before we are through here, just give a shout out to the instructional designers. I've worked with all three of them, some more than others. And I was nervous in the beginning several years ago, but I found them to be very responsive, very helpful. And I just can't say enough about working with them. So any of you who are concerned that might be an issue, don't be. They're great.
Lori, let me ask you while you're there, what did you find to be the most surprising element in working with an ID to develop a course? Like you said, you were resistant in the beginning. So what were you surprised to find worked, or what didn't work?
Well, I think my initial hesitation had to do with the fact that I was the content developer for so many courses, and I didn't want that to be compromised. And they don't do that. They work alongside of you to make what you've developed better. I was pleasantly surprised to learn that there are so many different ways that you can deliver material. And we're trying to get away from just type in your response to a discussion question. Instead, we use infographics, we use audio notes and video notes and so forth. And there's just a lot of different things that we can do that I wasn't aware of.
Thank you. Do you have any comments about that yourselves? The most surprising thing in trying to see how the course shifts in format and what the element of maybe working with a designer or talking with a designer, maybe you built it yourself, but something you learned from the team or something the team offered you was either helpful or not? I mean, I'm really open to, we're looking, this is our own continuous improvement as well, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, I think Ann says, I have an answer.
Well, I was on the phone with my sister-in-law. I was leaving the office one day last year, and she was laughing at me because I was like, "Oh, I forgot my iPad. I forgot my phone. Here's my watch. Oh wait, I don't know where my grade book is." And she said, "You have all of those gadgets, and you're keeping a paper grade book." Which I think is a nice little anecdote that shows sort of my love of shopping and my willingness to remain a Luddite in terms of being sort of a post-it note and scotch tape teacher. And then over the summer, because of the integration of the former PCS class, I worked very closely with Andy Mott and, sort of come in and say, we're going to do stuff to this class. And I went in, not cranky because I'm a nice person, but like I never taught online. I'd never taken an online class. I refused to learn to use the grade book. Bria's seen me like Facebooking it up, taking photographs of rubrics and uploading that.
I don't judge you. It's okay.
And all of that is to say that what I didn't expect from the experience was to learn so much. Like it was really, for me, it was a very educational experience where Anne taught me what we were doing at every stage of the game. And so now like my own class actually uses the grade book because it's not that hard, you just have to try. And I think that like even my on the ground course design has benefited from very simple things like organized folders by weeks rather than holding on to your own weird system that no student understood for 13 years. So I would just say that like if you go into it, that it's a collaboration, but also that Kim mentions the MED, but they are educators, and so I feel like I took a crash course, online course.
You built your own course.
Study really.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. I think.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was going to say that I think coming in, especially when you design a course, oftentimes you're connected to something you're really passionate about and you've been doing for many, many years. And so the class that we worked on, and it was a topic literally I focused on as a doc student. And so I developed this class and I've written book chapters on, I've done a lot of research in this area. So it was something that was very dear to me. And so even in the first meeting that we had, I realized just how serious you took it. And you had read everything that I put together. And so you came in prepared so that we could go sort of running right from the beginning. And so it was really nice so that I was caught off guard just how prepared you were. And that you really, it was such a pleasant, it was so pleasant to experience. Because from there, I think it built something that was very important, and even goes back to the comment I think that Marilyn had about how do you give feedback to individuals, because I think it's all tied, and I think you developed a sense of trust, and I think that's where it started from there. So regardless of what comments you gave me, your feedback or criticism, however you want to shape it, it came from a different source now. Because now we have built trust, and it's okay, so let me think more critically as to how she's discussing and then sort of move forward. So that was really great to experience through that.
I did. It was just that, just as a technology aspect of it, we found out maybe 2 weeks into the course that there was an app. So that was huge when all the classmates found out that there was an app that they could use, and they actually preferred to have access to the app, especially for doing the discussion, posts, and responses. So having that information available to students at the very beginning of the course be so helpful. And then also the difference between using Apple or Mac, iOS, I guess is what it's operating system, versus the regular computers, because going in to do video notes and stuff like that is different if you use a different kind of device. And so that was something that we learned in classes. So I was able to spend some time showing them how to do that, but it would have been also helpful at the beginning to have that as an option to say, if you're accessing from an iOS system, this is how you would do it, versus if you're operating through a traditional platform.
Excellent suggestion. Is there another comment over here that I missed? Oh,
yeah, I just wanted to say to everyone, very much with the Bria app, and it was really amazing how they were able to do it online, but they were able to do it like in 1 day. Like something that took me like 3 years. Like also, a flow now, the course, and really, really appreciate it. Very helpful. And I hope the students can take this training one day. That's my dream.
I love Effie's design process because she literally locks you in her office for a day and doesn't let you leave. She does feed you the entire time. Like there's like banquet halls that come through and there's like animals for you to pet for comfort. But, like, it's really a wonderful process. You do get locked in the office though for 8 hours.
I'd just like to throw out one final question to I realize this has gone so much better than I had hoped, so thank you. One final question to our panel. Any thoughts that you have about how the team can support you and faculty in general better, or something that you may not see us doing that you feel would make a difference in your course design process and ultimately the impact you have on your students?
Well, I can mention really briefly, I still recall when Bree, when you put made a short video and you added it to our Brightspace and you just sort of added it there, and it provided a quick introduction to students that they can actually see the program. And I sent you an email, thank you so much for doing this. And I still remember, so in the spirit of that one, there are things that we need that we don't know, because sometimes we're just so busy as faculty members and we're so inundated in our courses and students and other things. So I would recommend, and you're probably doing this already, but sometimes we don't know what we need. And so, but understanding our lived experience as faculty members is really important, so that you might say, you know what, if faculty had this, it would make their life so much easier. Like if we could do this for them, it would make so much easier for them. And so that came to mind, because when I thought, I was like, wow, but if you had asked me, what do you need? I wouldn't have been able to tell you. But then when I saw it, I was like, I needed this so much. So does that make sense?
Roll the hat on and we will figure it out.
Okay.
Paul, do you have a thought?
Well, my experience was wonderful, but a couple of thoughts. I'm in the humanities, and we have a lot of different adjunct faculty and full-time faculty teaching the same course. So as we build or rebuild master courses, I guess as the ID team gives us suggestions, if you ever see moments where, oh, this could be a week that could be particularly malleable depending on who's teaching the class, and we could say this will be, if someone says, I'd like to come in, but I really like to do that instead of this, identifying a couple of weeks in the class where that can be something that we can do, as opposed to we hire someone and say, you must teach this and that's it. That could be a good selling point for us. And this is really technical, and everyone in the room might know more than I do about this, but some of my faculty have been asking, is there a possibility where we can pool all of a student's discussion posts for the whole term into one document at the end to look as a sort of participation across the board mechanism?
I didn't think about that, but maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a portfolio. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really good piece. I see some folks are leaving. I just want to say quickly, hold on a second. We've created 2 brochures. One is designed for the master course developer. One is designed for the non-master course developer. It has some information I just want to share with you just quickly. It shows, I think, a couple of pieces that might be helpful to you. The process, the timelines, and how we can get something done from point A to point B. What the various roles of the content developer, the instructional designer, and the facilitator, for example, if it's a master course. And then something that we find all the time, unless they jump up and say hooray, we're talking yes about the continuous improvement. What's the difference between an instructional designer and an academic technologist? I think sometimes people blur the line. We are all complementary. None of our work is competitive. So literally, one can do this and someone can fill in the back. So that's an option. So just to give you some resources, some information that you can, when in a pickle, who to call. So feel free to take one or more than one.
Yeah.
And then if you don't want to take a hard copy, it's also available via Drive. And this is the link. If you don't want to jot it all down, just send me an email and I'll send you the link. And then you have the evaluation form already that I mentioned earlier. Will you please fill that part out? Those evaluations really will help us. And one class, Aaron, I think has a copy.
Yeah, I was hoping at some point to get some information from you guys about what I think are the unique strengths or tools of the online rights-based environment. And I am particularly interested in ways to gamify.
We're right there with you, sister. We're right
the
there.
online learning environment. I came in with a very specific reason for being here.
That's, we're trying to help all the different faculty get to where they want to go. Innovation is another key component of instructional design. Being able to say everything doesn't just have to be a discussion or an assignment. We can create or gamify pieces. We can use other tools to help take low-stake assessments of if the student is learning. Other ways that we can help the experience be beneficial. And when we're talking about adult students specifically, if they don't apply it, it has to be applied to something of value to them. Otherwise, they don't hang on. So either they're going in that career path or they're in it now. And to combat the I'm your consumer and not just a student. They sometimes think they're paying for this, I'm going to get my money's worth, and I'm going to tell you what you're going to do for me.
Yeah.
So, and then there's more technology we're trying it, and we put in for to hopefully be able to gamify everything more. So can we have?
Kim, I had one question because I didn't.
Hold one second, Marilyn. So we're in the process right now. We're told by John that we should be able to get it very soon, and it will probably meet your need. So let's talk soon because I think we're right on the cusp. Okay, Marilyn, go ahead.
Okay, I know you're trying to close out, and so I didn't hear the answer to, I think the question was posed, but I didn't hear the answer. Is it possible for the discussions and the assignments to be organized by the week they are assigned?
You mean in the grade book?
Yeah.
Yes, they can be reordered in the grade book. Matter of fact, I did it last week for someone. So you can reorder them. So if you're having a challenge with that, let me know and I can help you.
That's not big.
All right, I'll be in touch.
I believe you. Thank you all so much for coming. If you have any questions that pop into your mind that we didn't address, please feel free to email us. Thank you so much to the panelists.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
And all folks, I'm eager to see how many can join us.